Hello and you're welcome to the Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler, in association with Square. Square helps you look after your business needs from payments and menu management to online ordering. Visit square.com for more. Now, have you ever wondered about getting an electric bike? If so, you might have a few basic questions. Are they much more expensive? Are they easy to recharge? Are they harder to lock or secure? And how far can you actually go on a single charge? Well, Olivier Vander Elst is the co-founder of Green Air, a specialist electric bike company, and he's with me now. Ollie, before we get into the ABCs of electric bikes and what they do, is it lazy to consider an electric bike? Is that just me copping out of the whole bike experience?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one of the first primary misconceptions about electrically assisted bicycles. And it just is entirely wrong. There's actually studies that are proving that over time people exercise more because they're more incentivized to use their electric bike than their analog muscular ones. The way they work means that you have to be pedaling in order to get this assistance. So if you don't pedal, you don't get any assistance. And so it's an incentive. It just augments your own capabilities. But you do have the cardio exercise and you certainly have the workout, and you can gauge the level of assistance that you wish to avail of. So if you're feeling energetic, you can lower the assistance level and vice versa. If you're in a rush and you need all the power that you can get, you can increase the percentage of assistance.
Yeah, but let's just clarify that. I mean, if I have an electric bike and I tap the pedal and I just give it a slight nudge, depending on what setting I have and what the bike is, it will whir into action. And if I like, I can kind of just go along for the ride, right?
That would be true for the cheaper electric bikes with a fairly basic sensor. So you would just give it a little nudge and then the rotation happens. For the types that we're speaking about, or the ones that we're focusing on with Green Air, that wouldn't be true because it's very intuitive and it's very much connected to the full rotation and the pressure that you apply onto the pedals. So in other words, if you do only like a quarter of the rotational movement, well, it's not going to get you very far.
So typically, what kind of range are we talking about? From memory and trying them out, I recall, variations of between about 30 kilometers and about 70 kilometers on a single charge.
Yeah. Now again, the ones that we're focused on would be mostly in a range of 60 kilometers plus. Depending on the range of the battery. So the battery has a capacity in watt hours, and that determines the range. And then obviously depending on the motor and the strength, and it's always based on an average type use. So a person that weighs 70 kilos or plus, fairly even grounds.
Can I just say, what's 70 kilos? Sorry, from in old money. Is that about 13 stone, 12 stone, something like that?
Yeah, more like 12 stones. Yeah.
12 stone. Okay, so I'm okay. And does it change according to how hot or how cold the weather is, for example?
It does, but it's not hugely affecting us in Ireland because you never really dip into serious minus temperatures. But it's true that the battery is its happiest at around sort of 12, 15 degrees thereabouts.
But it would change depending on what power setting you have or what speed you're going, right?
Correct. Yeah. So so let's say you're in turbo the whole time, so you're getting over 300% assistance. That would diminish the range down to probably below 50 kilometers, depending on the battery that you have.
And do any of them have regenerative features, or is that just understood that they have different level of resistance, regenerative power?
Again, it's a question we get a lot, and the short answer is that the vast majority don't. There is a need, first of all, for that to happen, to have the motor in the rear hub, and most of the bikes that we sell, or the vast majority, would have middle motors, so next to the cranks. So you have a certain level of regeneration on certain niche brands, but I would sort of discard that as the exception.
Okay. What happens if you run out of charge when you're out in the open? Does it stop? Does it make it way harder to cycle it?
So again, it depends on the type of bike. So you have some that have zero drag, and that's an exciting sort of new category. So it means that once you get over the 25 kilometers an hour sort of virtual wall, you cycle on, and there is no drag. So there isn't the feeling that you have the motor exactly that you brought back. And then some others you do feel additional weight. Now you're never stuck because you can always ride them and cycle them, but you do have, on average, perhaps a 25% additional weight to carry with an assist bike. So some of them are really made to emulate what a conventional bike is, and just gives you that little nudge when you need it. And they're really the lightweight electric bikes. And then some are really only designed, or for the majority of the time, designed to be used under some level of assistance. And you have a very clear indication of what's left in the battery, from a range perspective, and the battery. So it's not like it comes, unannounced. You tend to see that coming, and if you do fall short, you tend to lower down the assistance and get to the point. But range anxiety is I suppose less so of a problem than in electric cars, for example, because you do.
Well, that's a whole other podcast, and we've looked at that quite a bit. But I take it it's a rule of thumb then that in general, because they have this extra equipment, they're slightly heavier than normal bikes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And would that also mean that they're more difficult, or they're heavier, or slightly more awkward, for example, to mount on a car or a van if you wanted to bring one down the country?
Yeah, so for example, if it's a car or a van, depending on the type of bike carrier you get for electric bikes, the recommended one would be a platform, so you need a tow hitch. And then for those, you have ramps, so you just basically, you don't deadlift them. If you do, you might need to carry it, or you just remove the battery, which would be about 3 kilos or 2.5 kilos. And you keep that safely inside the car while you're traveling with the bike on the back. But it's usually not a problem.
Now, you mentioned the battery there. I've tried different types of electrically assisted bikes, and some of them charge by simply plugging them in, and others have removable batteries. What's the norm now?
Yeah, for the vast majority, they're removable. A lot of them are now integrated into the frame. So from a visual aspect, it's much more appealing, and you can charge them directly onto the bike, or you have a locking mechanism with a key, and you remove them and charge them at work or at home.
And typically, how long will it take to recharge a battery in a normal 3-pin socket at home?
So again, depends on even Bosch, which would be using a lot as a motor provider, has 3 different chargers. So let's say you go for the 4 amps charger, you would from a 10% to a full would be around 4 hours. The majority of the time, we recommend people to actually not wait until the battery is that low, and just to do top ups. So just an hour here and there, and that's very healthy for the battery. They don't really need deep charges or discharges rather, and they like to be topped up.
And is it the same general rule as for electric cars, that you're not supposed to charge it really to 100%? It's better if you just charge it to 80%?
Yeah, I mean, there's no deterioration. There's a cutoff on the charger, so it's not a problem if you go to 100%. But it's true that lithium batteries, so it's the same chemistry in cars, between 30 and 90%, they're the happiest.
And so, being lithium batteries, then I presume it's the same rule of thumb that over time they will degrade.
They will. Again, that's the advantage of now the capacity, I suppose, for electric bikes far exceeds what you need to do on a daily basis. So if you buy a battery of, let's say, 625 watt hour or 750 watt hour, it tends to far exceed what you need. And what that means is that in 5 years' time, when you might have lost about 20% or a bit less than 20% capacity, it still completely fulfills what you needed to do. So that's the big difference where an electric car you will tend to try and push that boundary, where on a bike, there's only so many hours that you're really going to spend on the bike on a on a daily basis, unless you do really long trekking adventure rides, which we also have customers doing, but then they have like double battery setups.
Now, you mentioned speed earlier on. Is there a maximum allowable speed on an electric bike?
Yeah, so well, it's very relevant because even in Ireland, they're looking at all the vehicle standards as we speak. But the vast, like the general rule really is pedelec, and pedelec is up to 25 kilometers an hour assisted, and you don't require any license or insurance or anything. It's just treated as a regular bicycle. And then you have another category called the Pedelec S, which is an exciting one, but that needs to be well legislated, and that goes up to 45 kilometers an hour assisted. So
That's pretty fast.
well, yes and no. If you're, let's say, on a road bike, you would be well used to hit 32, 34 kilometers in your stride, and you might be frustrated with the 25 kilometers an hour wall that we spoke about earlier on a regular pedelec. And having this ability to go up to 45 when it's like an open straight road out of traffic does make sense. But again, it carries a certain legislation. At the moment, it's a little bit grey in Ireland, so it's very hard to register them. They would fall under the same category as MPVs, so the mopeds and the likes.
I think the reality might be ahead of the legislation, because in my area, every second kid has a bike that goes at about 55 kilometers per hour, and it works on the footpath as well, which is kind of a nice option. But it is, you're not allowed to modify electric bikes to go over that 25 or that right now, right?
No. I mean, there's no enforcement mechanism to check if that's obviously done. I think what will happen is, enforcement-wise, in Dublin particularly, you see all the delivery guys with retrofit kits, and that's just pure danger, because those bikes, the frames and most of the donor bike that's been used is not built for this, and then you have pure throttle, or the way the batteries are wired. There's been incidents of battery fires, so that all will have to change, and you see that in some of the, say, more mature markets. It's heavily clamped upon, because it's dangerous, and it's doing a disservice to the industry.
But do you think that we might see legislation that would safely and in a regulated way increase the speed of the electric bikes that we can buy here?
I think there's always going to be two different categories, and that's following what Europe is doing, which is the up to 25, and that's perfectly fine, and then the up to 45, which is a hot topic in Europe. So Belgium, where I'm from, for example, has a very clear legislation on that, and that has shown that there's a huge amount of people that have therefore switched, because they can do longer journeys and cut the journey time per day, because they have that speed. So imagine doing sort of 25 kilometers on each way every day. This extra 10 kilometers an hour makes quite a big difference in the time spent. So it's one thing to have the legislation, is the other that all parties involved are playing ball, which means insurance has to be affordable. It has to be a clear process to register and to get a little license plate for the fast pedelecs. So I just, yeah, I'm hopeful, but careful that it will happen in the proper manner.
Now, just to put some context in what we're talking about here, I mean, my recollection from testing and trying out some electric bikes is that they are considerably more expensive than quite a number of road bikes. I mean, the pricing that I saw at the time started at around 1,200, 1,300. I'm talking about road bikes now. Normally went up to about 2,000 and beyond. Is that still what you're looking to pay for one of these?
Yeah, well, obviously with COVID, there's been an increase in raw materials and costs in general. There is not a downwards trend in terms of pricing. We see that people value what they're buying more and more. An electric bike buying cheap is a false economy because it fails quickly. So
Why
you
do I
better.
think you're about to say that it's a bit more than what I've just quoted?
It is. It is. I mean, I was going to lead just to say that our average starting price is probably more like €2,500,
Wow.
and
Okay.
our average prices are probably around 3,800, and it goes up to
Whoa.
2,000
That's
for a
almost the price of an iPhone. Um, and if you do that, I mean, we're used to thinking about tax subsidies or grants and the bike to work scheme and all that sort of stuff. Does that work with electric bikes?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that was going to lead to the next category. So a regular pedelec bike that goes up to 25 kilometers an hour, you can get €1,500 of it under the cycle to work scheme. And there's also now the category called cargo bikes, which we're super excited about. We've been pushing that for over 10 years, which allows you to carry your children. It's really a straight replacement to a car for all the crash school runs, the supermarket runs, and it's protected from the weather. And it's very much should be treated as such and not just as a bike. And for those, you have a €3,000 threshold allowance under the cycle to work scheme. So that's super advantageous.
That'd be quite a chunk off. If you were investing in this, I know one of the things that I had to think very carefully and cautiously about is if I was cycling or taking one into town or taking one somewhere else, and then I wanted to have a coffee or meet somebody, I was always that little bit more afraid of locking it or how to secure it. Am I naive in thinking that some of them should be able to be tracked, maybe, or are there any advanced locking or secure methods you can use with electric bikes?
Yeah, so obviously it's still not a bike that you want to leave in the middle of O'Connell Street for the night just to see what happens. So most people who make that investment tend to know where they're leaving it at night, and a destination there is usually at the very least a Sheffield stand to lock your bike onto. So a good lock is needed. The tracking side, we do tend to sell a lot of it, which basically is directly installed into the motor, so it's not detected by anyone from the outside, and it allows you to track it on your phone. It doesn't lock the motor per se, but it shows you if someone tampers it, you have a warning, and it also reduces your insurance premium with certain insurance.
Can I ask about that? What is that? Is that a SIM card or is that a GPS?
The tracker?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it depends on the brand that you use and whether it's integrated with the bike initially or if it's a retrofit. But you do have to pay a monthly subscription after.
So that sounds like it's a cellular option then, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it probably uses a SIM card at one. But like, I'm just wondering, if I invested in one of these, should I stash an AirTag somewhere inside the frame or something like that and hope to be able to track it with my phone?
That's the cheapest and easiest way to do it. Obviously, you're relying on relays and so on. So there's limits to that. I think the signal strength is probably not the same either, and you have to replace it or change the. I don't think you change the batteries in the AirTags yet, but yeah. So you can do that absolutely. The ones that we use are just made for the e-bike, and once it's in, you never tend to worry about it. But there are systems, and even Bosch has an integrated system that you do not pay, that combines with your app on the latest iteration. So it's going in that direction. Good luck, insurance, and hope for the best.
Just in terms of maintenance and how long electric bikes last, is there anything particularly different about maintenance of a bike with an electric or an electrically assisted motor?
Yeah, so again, if you buy a quality side, a lot of the specification would be matching the extra power, and therefore the maintenance side should be under control, but you need better brakes. You need the gearing. The cassette, for example, would probably erode quicker on an e-bike than on a normal bike. The chain as well, because you have more pressure applied onto the components. So that's to bear in mind. So that's why, like, the higher end that we sell would bypass that by not having an external cassette, would have an inside hub, and would have a carbon belt drive as opposed to a chain, so that there's no stretching, there's no rust, there's no maintenance. So there's ways there's ways around that. In terms of the motor itself, it tends to last a long time, and you might need to replace the bearings over time. That tends to be after warranty. And the battery, as we spoke, has a lifespan. But other than that, it's important when purchasing, to understand what's going to happen after the purchase, and where are you going to be able to get it fixed, because there's a lot of online sellers, and that is a big risk, that are using some components that none of the bike shops stock. None of the bike shops will have any interest in servicing an electric bike that they have no knowledge of and that they didn't sell in the first place. And so they tend to be very short-lived, and end up in the landfill, which is the exact opposite idea that bikes were that e-bikes were brought in for in the first place.
Lastly, Ollie, one of the excuses I often hear from people about not getting a bike or an electric bike is the state of the roads. People say that other than the danger of trying to mix in with traffic, the actual quality of the road can be appalling in certain parts of the country, even in some of our biggest cities. How does it compare with the fields of Flanders or in Belgium?
Well, I don't think Flanders is a good contrast, because it's pretty much like Holland, and they started in the late 70s, so you cannot really compare there. But I have to say, since COVID, there's been amazing improvements. There's been budgets allocated, so between the greenways, and then you see some county councils are proactive and they look to do things the right way. And I would say it's very obvious for anyone that when that's in place. And then there's some parts that are just not as coherent, and therefore you can see that there's still work to do. But on the overall, I think it's improved greatly, and that not just for Dublin, but all across the country. I would say that it's county council specific when it comes to the implementation and the overall vision, or how hard they want to go at it. But you're totally right. You cannot. I mean, for us, the benchmark is, once you see parents happily enough using the cycle network for their kids, and see the kids ride to school, then you know that you're doing something right.
Okay, look, Olivier Vander Elst, co-founder of Green Air, thank you very much today for joining us and explaining everything about electric bikes. And that's all we have time for this week, folks. Thanks for listening to and watching The Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Thanks to Tabitha Monaghan, who produced, to Gav Hennessy on sound, and to Conan Doherty on video. And we'll talk to you the same time next week. Bye-bye.